orbit, presumably around the sun. Now it's in a simple orbit around a planet, if we use all the current definitions. Did the object change? No. But it raises some very interesting questions, and those questions are the ones that are at the edge of science that people want to try to work on and solve.
In working on scientific issues, addressing scientific issues, being simple, being clean shouldn't matter. We have to look at those things. But when we are defining terminology, we want terminology that will convey a meaning, a simple meaning, a straightforward meaning that puts objects in classes so we get just a very quick look idea of what they are. And then just a separate comment in terms of location. If you ask any real estate agent, there are three things that matter: location, location, location.
I had one comment I didn't remember to finish, and it also relates to this. I disagree that the definition needs to provide us with something very nice and simple. I disagree that having 1,000 planets is a problem. I think the word planet all by itself doesn't actually provide us with meaningful information anymore. And if there are 1,000 planets and there are myriad different types of planets, some of which happen to orbit objects we currently call planets, some of which are off on their own, that helps us understand things. And when there are only 8, you don't discover those subdivisions, those different types of objects, which lead you into meaningful information, meaningful ways to teach, meaningful things to learn. Just learning the names of the 8 planets does nobody any good. But learning that there are all these different types of objects, we start to learn an awful lot about the universe. So 1,000 is good.
Yeah, I like a lot of what David and Jack have said in the last few minutes. Things are messy. You learn as you grow from a child to an adult that's true in a lot of facets of life. That black and white turn into many shades of gray. Just get over it. That's the case in science too. I thought that what Jack said about where it's useful to make a reductionist view was right on target. But it's also the case that planetary science is in this big transition, because we only had the 8 and now we have hundreds, counting the extrasolar planets. And I like to make the analogy that it's as if you were a biologist on a small desert island and you only knew the flora and fauna of that island, and then suddenly were exposed to this intoxicating view of the variety and richness of all the flora and fauna on the Earth. You'd have to redo your taxonomy, and for a little while you might not be sure about how to do that. And some of your colleagues on the island might even say, well, those might not be life forms, right? We're not going to be able to count all those, and school children are going to have a problem on the island, and let's think about that. So I think that it's messy, and that's a natural consequence. I do want to make one comment about something Jack said about the composition of the scientists in the room being atypical, because I agree with him. By my count, there are 3 dynamicists in the room. Some would call them dynamixophiles. And that's an unusually high proportion in the Division of Planetary Sciences. We're invited to this meeting, so it is biased.
Just a parting thing.
Quick follow-up.
Then I guess I have to say, then why are we making so many endless categorizations when our time be better spent in redirecting, reprogramming how science is done? Well, not science, but how astronomy and astrophysics is relayed.
I'll just comment on that, because classifying is understanding at some level. That's why we're working on it.
And this is actually a trivial amount of effort. It makes a lot in the press, but even most of the people who are participating in this room over the past few years, far less than 1% of our time has been devoted to this issue.
Next question or comment?
Hi, I'm Shirley Green from Billings, Montana, and I'm an educator, I told you that. My question is, what does clearing of the neighborhood mean? Very serious question. I really don't.
Well, I think it means that there are not many objects in orbits which are crossing it or nearby it.
Jupiter's not a planet.
Same size.
What's not like a Trojan?
It's very small objects. I'm not defending the IAU definition. As far as I'm concerned, what they did was they looked in the back of the book, they saw what the answer was, and they tried to concoct the solution. And they didn't do a good job of it.
Do any of the other panelists want to comment on
Yeah, I just wanted to make it a little simpler, and maybe perhaps not as rigorous, but more simple. Think about the asteroid belt. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of objects all together, really close. Whereas for Jupiter, there's basically nothing nearby.
So you're calling Pluto and the Kuiper Belt.
Exactly. They're all, Pluto has not cleared out the Kuiper Belt region.
Jupiter has its Trojans, so I would argue by number they're a lot, by mass.
No, but the point is Jupiter controls dynamically the rings.
Okay, but controlling the neighborhood is not the same as clearing the neighborhood.
Okay, so it appears there's not a clear consensus. It's messy. Next comment and question. We can come back to that if you want to.
Hi, Tom Hagley from New York, New York. Just wondering, why can't there be different ways or different types of categorizations? Like one categorization based on orbital dominance and formation, and another set of categorizations based on chemical characteristics. Why can't there be two or more types?
I don't see any reason why there perhaps could not be. Right? The more you understand about the planets, the more you might understand about formation or the dynamics, the more categories you may decide you need in order to understand those objects, in order to draw connections between different types of objects. That's where learning occurs.
I must disagree, unfortunately. I think if you don't have a clear definition, it makes it more difficult to learn and to understand. And I can give you an analogy. I've just spent 2 years trying to learn microbiology. And I only realized about a couple months ago that when I've been reading a basic textbook, it repeats the same thing over and over again, but each chapter is basically classified differently. And it makes it very difficult to learn and very difficult to understand. And I think you're just passing on trying to understand something really clearly.
There are different classifications, and you can look at things different ways, and you get different groupings. And part of the difficulty in defining planets is this. And I want to note with moons, also known as planetary satellites, they're all put together. There's no size boundary in that definition of that term. But if we do that, then any object orbiting a star would be a planet.
I would like to comment on I'm Laurel Kornfeld from Highland Park, New Jersey, and I have a blog all about Pluto, laurele.livejournal.com. First of all, regarding the moon, the comment there, just moons. In the 19th century, in various textbooks, the satellites of planets were referred to as secondary planets. Why not go back to that? That puts a dynamical consideration there. They orbit other planets. They orbit primary planets, which orbit stars, but they're still, they're still planets. The other thing related to that is I favor a very broad definition of planet with multiple subcategories that can distinguish all these differences. And I want to point out that there are realities. Perception is reality. There are realities in the educational world, in the media, where if Pluto is taken out and you're taught if we go with 8 planets, kids in kindergarten are going to learn just those 8. Most of us didn't learn about Ceres in elementary school. That is a practical result. So kids are going to learn less, not more. And I think that's important to consider. It's important to consider that people do think in terms of hierarchies. They do think in terms of survivor. This person's voted off. They think of winning. Okay, and we have to take public perception into account in communicating, especially in terms of if we want to have an international year of astronomy and reach out to people and develop a scheme that, I guess, meets people where they are instead of goes will discourage learning, will reduce what students learn. I mean, my nephew is 5 years old, and he can understand that there are at least 10 planets and probably